Welcome to Untold Whispers. I'm your narrator tonight, here to share a story both haunting and peaceful. Take a deep breath, dim the lights, let the night settle in. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more quiet chills. Tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know who's still awake with me tonight. I was 16 when I found the tapes, but the recording started when I was 4 years old, which means my mother had been documenting my entire childhood without me knowing, creating what she called her behavioral archive in the basement of our suburban home where nobody ever went except her. The discovery happened on a Tuesday afternoon in October. I came home early from school because of a half-day. My mother was still at work, and I needed to find our old photo albums for a history project. She'd mentioned once that some boxes were stored in the basement, so I went down there for the first time in years. The basement was finished, carpeted, with shelves lining every wall, but instead of the usual storage mess most basements have, everything was meticulously organized. Rows and rows of plastic bins labeled with dates, names, and cryptic codes. I didn't understand at first. Then I saw my name on one of the bins, then another, then 6 more. I pulled down the first container labeled with my name and the years 2009, 2011. Inside were cassette tapes, dozens of them, each one marked with a date and a brief description like kitchen conversation, defiance indicators, or bedroom talk, emotional manipulation attempt. But here's what made my hands start shaking. Each tape had a corresponding notebook entry with full transcriptions of conversations I'd completely forgotten, annotated in my mother's handwriting with observations about my tone, my word choices, my body language that she must have noted from memory after listening to the recordings. I found a small tape player on one of the shelves. My hands were trembling as I inserted one of the tapes from 2015 when I was 11 and pressed play. My own voice filled the basement, younger, talking to my best friend about how I thought my math teacher was unfair. We were in my bedroom. I remembered that day vaguely, but what I didn't remember was my mother standing outside the door with a recording device, capturing every word. Then came my mother's voice on the tape. She must have recorded her own observations immediately after. Subject shows early signs of authority resistance, dismissive attitude toward legitimate criticism, possible development of oppositional defiant tendencies. Recommend monitoring escalation. Subject. She called me subject. I went through more tapes, conversations with friends, phone calls I'd made from the landline in the kitchen, arguments with my younger brother, private moments I thought I was alone, talking to myself while doing homework, singing in my room, crying after a bad day at school, all of it recorded, all of it analyzed. The notebooks were worse than the tapes, though, because they showed the depth of her obsession. Every conversation had a full transcript, some running 10 or 15 pages, and in the margins were her notes in different colored pens. Red for what she considered warning signs, blue for patterns she was tracking, green for behavior she wanted. To reinforce, one entry from when I was 13 caught my attention. A conversation with my friend about a boy I liked. Typical teenage stuff, nothing inappropriate. But my mother's notes covered 3 full pages analyzing my attachment patterns and romantic delusions and need for external validation indicating low self-worth. She'd created charts tracking how often I used certain words, graphs showing my emotional volatility based on tone analysis she'd done herself, timelines of what she called my behavioral phases, with predictions about future development. I found recordings from last week, last month, last year. She was still doing it, still recording everything. I thought about every conversation I'd had in our house recently, every phone call, every private moment in my room. None of it was private. None of it had ever been private. There were tapes of my father too, and my brother. But the bins with my name outnumbered everyone else's 3 to 1. I was her primary focus, her main subject of study, and I had no idea why. I sat on the basement floor surrounded by years of my own recorded life, trying to remember if I'd ever seen my mother carrying a recording device, if I'd ever noticed anything strange. But she must have hidden microphones throughout the house, small ones, easy to conceal, always listening. The worst part was reading her analysis of conversations where I'd told friends I loved my mother, where I'd defended her to people who suggested she was too strict. She'd noted these as successful conditioning moments and effective loyalty reinforcement. My hands found a notebook labeled Intervention Strategies. Inside were detailed plans for how to respond to various behaviors she'd identified in her recordings. If I showed signs of rebellion, she had a specific script to follow. If I seemed too independent, she had methods to increase my dependence on her approval. If I formed friendships she deemed unsuitable, she had tactics to subtly discourage them. I realized then that so many moments in my life that felt organic, felt like natural conversations with my mother, were actually calculated responses based on surveillance. She knew what I was going to say before I said it because she'd been studying me like a lab experiment for 12 years. The newest recordings were from 3 days ago. I'd been talking to myself while getting ready for school, complaining about being tired, wondering out loud if I should quit the volleyball team because practice was exhausting. Her notes on that recording said, "Monitor for depression indicators. Consider restricting social activities to increase home dependency. Vulnerable state could be useful for reinforcing maternal bond." I heard the garage door open upstairs. My mother was home early. I quickly put everything back exactly as I'd found it, my heart hammering so hard I thought she might hear it from upstairs. I climbed the basement stairs, trying to control my breathing, trying to look normal. She was in the kitchen unpacking groceries when I came up. She smiled at me, that same warm smile she always had. "How was school, sweetheart?" I managed to say, "It was fine." My voice sounded strange to my own ears, wondering if there was a microphone in the kitchen recording this exact conversation. If tonight she'd sit in the basement and analyze my tone, write notes about my stress indicators, plan her next intervention strategy. "You look pale," she said, stepping closer, putting her hand on my forehead like she was checking for fever. "Are you feeling okay?" And that's when I understood the real horror of what I'd discovered. I couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't confront her, because if I did, she'd know I'd been in the basement. She'd know I'd found her archive. And based on those intervention strategy notebooks, I had no idea what she might do to protect her surveillance system. So I smiled back at her and said I was just tired, and she nodded like she believed me. But I knew that later tonight she'd listen to this conversation on tape. She'd analyze my micro-expressions that she'd memorized. She'd write in her notebook about my elevated stress levels and pale complexion, and she'd plan accordingly. I went to my room and sat on my bed, looking around at the walls, the corners, the shelves, wondering where the microphones were hidden, wondering how long she'd let me keep the secret of knowing about her secret, wondering what her notebooks would say tomorrow about the girl who discovered she'd never had a single private moment in her entire life. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all those tapes in the basement, hundreds of hours of my recorded existence, and I realized my mother didn't just want to control me. She wanted to own every version of me that had ever existed, preserving them all in her archive like specimens in jars, studied and cataloged and analyzed forever. And the recordings were still running, even now, even as I lay there in the darkness, pretending everything was normal. The first time it happened, I thought there was an emergency. I was 8 years old, and my father was shaking my shoulder in the dark, whispering that I needed to get up right now. We were going for a drive. I remember looking at my alarm clock, the red numbers glowing 2:47 a.m., and asking if something was wrong, if we were going to the hospital. But he just put his finger to his lips and told me to put on my shoes and jacket quietly. So we didn't wake my mother or my little sister. The thing about being 8 years old is you trust your parents completely. You assume they have reasons for everything they do, even when those reasons don't make any sense. So I followed him down the stairs in my pajamas and sneakers, my jacket zipped up over my shirt with the dinosaurs on it. We got in his truck, and he started driving. No explanation, no destination mentioned. Just driving through our neighborhood while everyone else was asleep. The streets were empty, the houses all dark, and I sat in the passenger seat trying to understand what was happening. Then he started talking fast and angry about how my uncle had disrespected him at the family barbecue 3 weeks ago, how nobody appreciated anything he did, how my mother's side of the family always looked down on him. His hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white. He ran a red light. There were no other cars around, but it still scared me. I asked if we could go home, and he acted like he didn't hear me. Just kept driving faster, taking turns too sharp, talking about people I barely knew, and things I didn't understand. We ended up on the highway, going 20 miles over the speed limit. My father's voice getting louder as he listed every perceived slight and insult from the past year. I pressed myself against the passenger door and tried to make myself smaller, hoping that if I stayed quiet enough, he'd remember I was there and take me home. But here's what made it worse. When we finally got back home at 4:30 in the morning, he parked in the driveway and turned to me with a completely normal expression, smiled, and said, "That was nice, wasn't it, some father-son time?" Like we'd just been out for ice cream. I nodded because I didn't know what else to do, and he told me not to mention our drive to my mother because she wouldn't understand. It was our special thing, just between us. I went back to bed but couldn't sleep. I had school in 3 hours, and my mind was racing, trying to process what had just happened, trying to understand if I'd done something wrong, if this was normal, if other kids got woken up in the middle of the night for drives with their angry fathers. It didn't happen again for 2 weeks. I started to think maybe it was a one-time thing. Maybe my father had just been stressed that night, and everything would be normal now. Then he woke me up at 3:15 a.m. on a Wednesday. This time we drove to the industrial part of town where everything was closed and dark. He talked about his boss, about co-workers who didn't respect him, about how he should have been promoted years ago. He punched the steering wheel twice while talking, and I flinched both times. The pattern became clear after the third drive. There was no schedule, no way to predict when it would happen. Sometimes 2 weeks would pass, sometimes 3 nights in a row. I started sleeping in my clothes because getting dressed while he stood over my bed made me too nervous. I kept my shoes next to my pillow. I was always terrified I'd fall asleep in school. My teacher asked if I was feeling okay, because I kept putting my head down on my desk. I couldn't tell her the truth. My father's warning about keeping our drives secret played in my head constantly. My mother noticed I looked tired. She asked if I was having nightmares. I almost told her everything, but then I remembered my father's face when he said she wouldn't understand, the way his jaw clenched, the way his eyes got hard. So I said I was fine, just had trouble sleeping sometimes. The drives got longer, an hour, then 2 hours, then 3. He'd drive to the next town over, to places I'd never been, all while ranting about people who'd wronged him, money he was owed, respect he deserved. His driving got more erratic, swerving between lanes, speeding up suddenly, braking hard. I threw up once, during a drive that lasted until almost 6 a.m. He'd been taking curves too fast on a mountain road, and my stomach couldn't handle it anymore. He pulled over and waited while I was sick on the side of the road. Then he was quiet for the rest of the drive home, which was somehow worse than the ranting. The worst night was in December. I was 9 by then, and he woke me at 2 a.m. We drove for about 40 minutes until we were on a rural road I'd never seen before. No streetlights, no houses, just empty fields on both sides. And then he stopped the car. He turned off the engine, turned off the headlights, and we sat there in complete darkness. I waited for him to start talking, to start listing his grievances like he always did, but he just sat there, staring straight ahead at nothing, his hand still on the steering wheel even though we weren't moving. I asked if we were going home soon. No answer. I asked if he was okay. Silence. I asked if I could turn on the radio. Nothing. The darkness outside was total. No moon that night, no stars visible through the clouds. I couldn't see anything beyond the windows, and my father sat motionless like a statue, breathing steadily, completely still. I started crying, quietly at first, then harder, when he still didn't acknowledge me. I was 9 years old, sitting in a truck in the middle of nowhere, in the dark with my father who wouldn't speak or move, and I didn't know if we were ever going home. Time moved strangely in that darkness. I had no idea how long we sat there. It felt like hours, but might have been less. I counted my breaths trying to stay calm, got to 312 before I lost track. Then suddenly he started the engine, turned the headlights back on, and drove home like nothing had happened, still without saying a word. When we got home, he finally spoke. "Go to bed." That was all he said. I went to my room and climbed under my covers, fully dressed, shoes and all, shaking so hard my teeth were chattering. I heard him go to his bedroom, heard the door close, heard normal house sounds resume like the last 3 hours hadn't happened. The drives continued after that night. Sometimes he'd talk, sometimes he wouldn't. I never knew which version I'd get, the ranting father or the silent one. Both terrified me, but the silence was worse. At least when he was talking, I knew where his mind was. I started having actual nightmares, dreaming that I was in the truck and we drove off a cliff, or that we stopped on a dark road and my father got out and left me there, or that we drove forever and never went home. I was exhausted all the time, falling asleep in class, forgetting homework. My grades dropped. My teacher called my mother in for a conference. I sat outside the classroom while they talked, terrified she'd find out about the night drives. But my mother didn't find out. Nobody found out. My father kept waking me up at random hours, kept taking me on drives that could last 20 minutes or 4 hours, kept talking or not talking, driving safely or dangerously, stopping in empty parking lots or on dark rural roads. I was 9 years old, living in constant anticipation of my bedroom door opening in the darkness, of my father's hand on my shoulder, of his whispered command to get up and come with him. And the worst part, the part that made me feel sick even thinking about it, was that I could never predict when it would happen next, tonight or next week, which meant I could never really sleep, never really relax, never feel safe in my own bed, because any night could be a driving night, and I'd only know when it was too late to do anything but follow him into the darkness. I took 17 pills every day by the time I was 14, each one color-coded and organized in my mother's special pill organizer that she'd labeled with times and purposes. Morning meds for my heart condition, afternoon meds for my blood disorder, evening meds for my immune system, nighttime meds for my thyroid. My mother kept a medical binder that was 3 inches thick, filled with my supposed diagnoses, symptoms she'd tracked, medication schedules she'd created, and appointment notes from doctors we'd seen over the years. She updated it weekly, sometimes daily, treating my health like a full-time job. I'd been sick my entire life, according to her, or at least that's what I believed. She homeschooled me because regular school was too risky for someone with my conditions. I couldn't play sports or run around because my heart was fragile. I couldn't eat most foods because my digestive system was compromised. I couldn't have sleepovers because I needed my medication schedule maintained precisely. The thing is, when you're told from age 5 that you're sick, you don't question it. You just accept that this is your life, that other kids are healthy and you're not, that you need pills and restrictions and constant monitoring to survive. My mother measured everything, my temperature twice daily, my pulse after any physical activity, my food intake down to the gram. She had charts on the refrigerator tracking my symptoms, which seemed to always be present no matter how many medications we tried. She talked about my health constantly, to neighbors, to the few family members we still saw, to checkout clerks at the grocery store. My daughter has multiple conditions, very rare, very serious, she'd say, with this concerned expression that made people sympathetic, made them tell her she was such a dedicated mother. I had a new doctor's appointment almost every month, different specialists for different conditions, cardiologists and hematologists and endocrinologists. My mother always did most of the talking during these appointments, explaining my symptoms in detail while I sat quietly on the examination table. Most doctors would listen, nod, adjust medications, or order tests. My mother always seemed to know exactly what to say to keep them concerned but not alarmed, to maintain the treatment plans without triggering too much skepticism. But when I was 15, my regular cardiologist retired, and we had to see someone new. That's when everything started to unravel, though I didn't recognize it at first. The new doctor was younger, a woman with sharp eyes who actually directed her questions at me instead of my mother. She asked me to describe my symptoms in my own words, asked how I felt on a daily basis, asked what activities I wished I could do. I answered carefully, aware of my mother sitting in the corner taking notes like she always did. I told the doctor about my heart palpitations and chest pain, about feeling weak and tired, about the shortness of breath I experienced. The doctor listened, then asked when I'd last had these symptoms. I thought about it. Last week, I think, or maybe 2 weeks ago. And before that, I'm not sure. My mother keeps better track than I do. The doctor looked at my mother, then back at me and asked a question no one had ever asked before. Do you feel these symptoms when you're doing something you enjoy, or only when you're supposed to take your medications or see doctors? The question confused me. I looked at my mother, who had stopped writing and was staring at the doctor with an expression I'd never seen before, something cold and angry. Her symptoms are documented extensively, my mother said, her voice tight. I have years of records. The doctor held up a hand. I'd like to run some tests, standard cardiology workup, ECG, echocardiogram, stress test if she's up for it. My mother stood up quickly. She can't do a stress test. Her condition is too severe, her previous cardiologist said. I'd like to evaluate that myself, the doctor interrupted, still looking at me. Would you be willing to try, just walking on a treadmill while we monitor your heart? I nodded, curious now about what a stress test would show. I'd never been allowed to do one before. The test happened 2 days later. My mother insisted on being in the room, standing close to the treadmill controls like she might need to shut it down at any moment. The doctor started me at a slow walk, gradually increasing the speed. I expected to feel the chest pain, the shortness of breath, the symptoms that had defined my life, but they didn't come. I walked faster, then jogged lightly, my heart rate elevated normally. No palpitations, no pain, no weakness. I saw my mother's face change while I was on that treadmill, the concern melting into something else, something that looked like panic. She kept asking the doctor if this was safe, if we should stop, but the doctor ignored her, focused on the monitors showing my completely normal heart function. After the test, the doctor asked my mother to step outside while she discussed the results with me. My mother refused at first, said she needed to be present for all my medical discussions, but the doctor was firm, said it was standard procedure to speak with teenage patients privately. When we were alone, the doctor pulled her chair close to mine and spoke quietly. I need you to be honest with me. Do you actually feel the symptoms you describe, or do you describe them because your mother tells you that's what you should be feeling? The question made my stomach hurt, not from any medical condition, just from the weight of what she was asking. I don't know, I whispered. I've always felt them, or I thought I did. Tell me about your medications, all 17 of them. Do you know what each one is for? I rattled off what my mother had told me. Heart medication, blood thinner, immune suppressant, thyroid hormone. The list went on. The doctor was quiet for a moment, then said something that changed everything. Based on your test results today and your medical history that I reviewed, you don't have a heart condition. Your heart is completely healthy, and I'd like to consult with your other specialists about whether your other diagnoses are accurate. My hand started shaking. What do you mean I've been sick my whole life? Have you, or has your mother told you that you've been sick your whole life? The difference between those two things had never occurred to me before. But now it opened up like a chasm in my mind, swallowing everything I thought I knew about myself. When my mother came back in, the doctor told her the test results, told her I had no cardiac abnormalities, suggested we might want to reconsider the current treatment plan. My mother's face turned red. She argued with the doctor, cited previous tests and diagnoses, pulled out her binder and started reading from it, her voice getting louder. The doctor remained calm, said she'd be happy to review any documentation, but based on today's findings, she couldn't justify continuing cardiac medications for a healthy heart. "You don't understand how serious this is," my mother said, her hands trembling as she gripped the binder. "I've spent 10 years managing her conditions. I know her symptoms better than anyone." "I'm sure you do," the doctor said, and something in her tone made my mother stop talking. We left that office with my mother silent and furious, gripping my arm too tight as we walked to the car. In the parking lot, she finally spoke. "That doctor doesn't know what she's talking about. We're not going back there. We'll find someone who actually understands your condition." But I was starting to understand something else, starting to see the pattern I'd been too young or too conditioned to notice before. Every time a doctor suggested I was healthier than my mother claimed, we switched doctors. Every time someone questioned the number of medications, my mother had explanations ready. That night, I looked at my 17 pills lined up in their organizer, and for the first time I wondered what would happen if I didn't take them. Wondered if I'd feel worse or if I'd feel the same. Wondered how many of these pills I actually needed versus how many my mother needed me to take. I started researching my conditions online when my mother wasn't watching, and what I found made me feel sick in a way that had nothing to do with illness. Many of my symptoms could be caused by the medications themselves, side effects that created the very problems they were supposed to solve. The blood disorder my mother said I had, I couldn't find any test results for it in her binder when I looked. Just her notes about symptoms she'd observed, the immune deficiency that kept me isolated, no specific diagnosis, just general concerns about my fragile system. The thyroid condition, the digestive issues, the chronic fatigue, all documented extensively by my mother, but with surprisingly little actual medical evidence. I was 15 years old, holding a pill organizer full of medications for conditions I was starting to suspect I never had, given to me by a mother who I was beginning to realize had been lying to me for as long as I could remember. And the worst part, the part that made it hard to breathe, not from any heart condition, but from pure fear, was that I still lived with her, still depended on her for everything. And if I was right about what she'd done, if she'd kept me sick on purpose for 10 years, then I had no idea what she might do if I tried to stop taking the pills. So I kept taking them, kept playing sick, kept letting her measure and monitor and medicalize every aspect of my life. Because I didn't know how to escape, didn't know who would believe me, didn't know how to prove that the person who claimed to be saving my life might actually be the one destroying it. My mother threw dinner parties every month, elaborate affairs with cloth napkins and multiple courses and wine glasses that caught the candlelight just right. She'd spend days preparing, cleaning the house until it gleamed, arranging flowers, selecting the perfect menu. She was a different person during these parties. Warm and laughing, telling charming stories about our family life, touching my shoulder affectionately when she passed my chair, calling me sweetheart and darling in front of her guests, playing the role of the devoted mother so perfectly that even I almost believed it. The guests loved her, loved us. They'd comment on what a beautiful family we were, how lucky I was to have such an attentive mother, how our home felt so welcoming and full of love. I'd smile and nod and play my part in her performance. But I learned early, around age 13, that the real dinner party started after the guests left. That's when my mother's face would change, the warmth draining out of it, like water from a sink, replaced by something cold and calculating. The first time I understood the pattern, we'd just finished hosting 8 people, a Saturday evening in October. Everyone had complimented the food, the ambiance, my mother's dress. They'd hugged her goodbye and thanked her profusely for a lovely evening. The moment the last car pulled away, she turned to me in the kitchen where I was loading the dishwasher and said, "You were practically silent during dinner. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was for me, having a daughter who sits there like a mute while I'm trying to entertain?" I'd actually spoken several times during dinner, answered questions about school, laughed at jokes, but contradicting her was pointless. I knew that by then she spent the next hour dissecting everything I'd done wrong, how I'd held my fork, how I'd laughed too loud at one point and not loud enough at another, how my posture was poor, how I'd reached for the breadbasket before it was offered to me, how I'd made her look bad in front of people whose opinions mattered. This became the routine, the beautiful performance during the party, then the brutal critique after. But it got worse as I got older. By the time I was 15, she'd refined her technique. During the parties, she'd make jokes about me that sounded affectionate to the guests but carried an edge I could feel cutting into my skin. "Oh, she's been eating like a horse lately. I keep telling her to watch it, but teenagers never listen," she'd say with a laugh while serving dessert, her hand resting on my shoulder in a gesture that looked loving but felt like a weight. The guests would chuckle, maybe glance at me sympathetically, and I'd force a smile while my mother's fingers pressed just slightly too hard against my collarbone. Or she'd tell a story about something embarrassing I'd supposedly done, exaggerating it for comedic effect, making me the punchline while maintaining that affectionate tone that made it seem like harmless mother-daughter teasing. She's still afraid of the dark at 16, can you believe it? I found her sleeping with every light on in her room last week. Completely untrue, but told with such conviction that everyone believed it. I'd sit there burning with humiliation while people laughed, while my mother patted my hand and said, "It's okay, honey. Everyone has their quirks." Her eyes meeting mine with a look that dared me to contradict her. After those parties, the post-event sessions got longer, sometimes lasting until 2 or 3 in the morning. My mother would make me stand in the kitchen while she sat at the table, listing everything I'd done to embarrass her. She'd replay conversations from the dinner, telling me what I should have said instead, how I should have laughed, where I should have looked. She'd make me practice responses for the next party, correcting my tone and facial expressions until they met her standards. The worst nights were when she'd make me apologize, formally, standing in front of her, for ruining her evening with my presence, for making her look like a bad mother, for existing in a way that reflected poorly on her. I was 17 when the mask finally slipped in front of someone else. We'd hosted a dinner party for 6 people, one of my mother's friends from her book club, and her husband had come, along with 2 other couples. It had been a typical performance, my mother glowing and gracious, me playing my supporting role. Everyone left around 10:30, calling out their thanks and goodbyes. My mother stood at the door waving until the last car disappeared. Then she closed the door, and her expression changed instantly. She turned to me with that cold look I knew so well and started in immediately. "You contradicted me during the salad course. You said you liked olives when I just told everyone you hated them. Do you enjoy making me look like I don't know my own daughter?" I tried to explain that I did like olives. I'd never said I hated them, but she talked over me, her voice getting sharper. "And that dress was completely inappropriate. You looked like you were trying to get attention from the men at the table. Do you have any idea how that reflects on me?" I was wearing a simple knee-length dress she'd approved that morning, but pointing that out would only make things worse. She was really getting started, pacing the living room now, listing my failures from the evening, when we heard a car door close outside. We both froze. Through the front window, I saw the book club friend walking back up our path. She'd left her phone on the side table. I could see it sitting there, charging where she'd plugged it in earlier. My mother's transformation was instant, the cold anger vanishing, replaced by her party smile as she opened the door before the woman could knock. "Did you forget something?" my mother said warmly. "My phone. I'm so sorry to bother you." "No bother at all. Come in. I think it's right here." The woman stepped into the living room, reaching for her phone. Then she paused, looking at me standing rigid in the center of the room. then at my mother, and something flickered across her face. The air in the room felt strange, charged, like she could sense the scene she'd interrupted even though she hadn't heard the words. "Is everything okay?" she asked slowly. My mother laughed, that perfect hostess laugh. "Of course. We were just cleaning up. You know how it is after a party." But the woman kept looking at me, and I realized my face must have shown something. Some trace of the fear and humiliation I'd been feeling moments before. There was a long silence. The woman holding her phone, my mother's smile becoming slightly fixed, me frozen between them. And in that silence, I saw the woman's expression shift from confusion to understanding, like pieces clicking into place in her mind. "Well," she said finally, "thank you again for a lovely evening." But her voice had changed, lost its warmth, become careful and distant. She left quickly, and I watched through the window as she sat in her car for a moment before starting it, not driving away immediately, just sitting there. My mother closed the door and stood with her back to it, not looking at me, not speaking, for almost a minute. When she finally turned around, her face was blank, unreadable. "Go to your room," she said quietly. I went, expecting her to follow, to continue the critique, to punish me somehow for the woman's accidental intrusion, but she didn't. The next day, she acted like nothing had happened, made breakfast, asked about my homework, maintained the pleasant mother routine even though we were alone. But we never saw that book club friend again. My mother made excuses about why she couldn't come to the next dinner party, or the one after that. Eventually, she just stopped mentioning her. I often wondered what that woman thought she'd seen in our living room that night, what she'd read in my face and my mother's frozen smile and the tension in the air. If she'd understood what our dinner parties really were, performances with an audience of one who paid the price for admission long after everyone else went home. The parties continued, my mother's charm never faltering in front of guests, but I noticed she started being more careful about the timing, making sure everyone's cars were really gone before she dropped the act, double-checking that phones and scarves and purses had all left with their owners. She couldn't risk another witness, another person seeing what she became when the performance ended, when the candles were blown out and the dishes were dirty and there was no one left to charm. Just me, standing in the kitchen at midnight, listening to her catalog my failures, feeling the weight of her version of love pressing down like those hands on my shoulders during dinner. Affectionate to everyone watching, painful only to the person underneath. I was 19. Now, away at college most of the year, but I still came home for holidays, and my mother still threw her dinner parties, and I still played my role, because even now, even knowing what I knew, part of me kept hoping that maybe someday the warm mother from the parties would be the one who stayed after the guests left, but she never was. The lock was installed on the outside of my bedroom door when I was 11. My father said it was for my own good, for when I needed time to think about my behavior, to learn consequences. He made it sound reasonable when he explained it, like this was normal parenting. The first time he used it, I'd left my backpack on the living room floor instead of hanging it by the door where it belonged. A small mistake, the kind any kid makes, but my father saw it differently. "Room now," he said, his voice flat and cold. I went to my room expecting a lecture, maybe losing video game privileges for a week. Instead, I heard the lock click from the outside, heard his footsteps walking away down the hall. I called out asking when I could come out, no answer. The thing about being locked in your own bedroom is that it doesn't feel like your room anymore. It becomes a cell. Every familiar object transforms into a reminder that you can't leave, that someone else controls whether you're free or trapped. That first time lasted 4 hours. I heard him moving around the house, heard the television turn on, heard him making dinner in the kitchen, normal sounds of life continuing while I sat on my bed staring at the door. When he finally unlocked it and told me I could come out, he acted like nothing unusual had happened, asked if I'd learned my lesson about putting things away. I nodded quickly, desperately, just wanting it to be over. But it wasn't over. It was just beginning. The second time was a week later. I'd talked back when he told me to turn off my computer, just said, "in a minute," because I was in the middle of something, He didn't yell or argue, just pointed to my room. 6 hours that time, including dinner. He slid a plate of food under the door. The gap was just barely big enough. The plate scraped against the floor, and I had to pull it through carefully so nothing spilled. Eating alone in my locked room, while I heard my father and younger brother eating together in the dining room, their voices carrying down the hall, casual conversation like I didn't exist. The pattern established itself quickly. Any infraction, no matter how small, meant hours in the locked room. Forgot to make my bed, locked in. Didn't finish my vegetables, locked in. Took too long in the bathroom, locked in. My father never explained how long each punishment would last. Sometimes it was 3 hours, sometimes 8. I never knew. The uncertainty was part of it. I'd sit there trying to calculate what I'd done wrong and how angry he was and how long that might translate to. The lockings got longer, 10 hours, 12, overnight. He'd slide breakfast under the door in the morning, wordless. I'd hear his footsteps approach, see the plate appear, hear him walk away. I started keeping track on a piece of paper I hid under my mattress, dates and durations, trying to find a pattern, trying to predict, but there was no logic to it that I could understand. Minor mistakes sometimes got me. Locked up longer than bigger ones. When I was 12, he locked me in on a Friday evening for leaving a glass on the coffee table. I didn't come out until Sunday afternoon, 2 full days. Meals slid under the door 3 times a day. No communication, no explanation of when it would end. I wasn't allowed to have my phone in my room during lockings, no computer, no way to contact anyone. I had a bathroom attached to my room, at least there was that. I didn't have to use a bucket or something worse, but the isolation was crushing. Hours and hours with nothing but my thoughts, and the sound of life continuing without me on the other side of the door. My brother learned not to talk to me through the door. The one time he tried asking if I was okay, I heard my father's voice sharp and angry, heard my brother's footsteps running away. After that, it was silence. I missed school sometimes because of the lockings. My father would call in saying I was sick, and I'd sit in my room listening to the house empty out. My brother leaving for school, my father leaving for work eventually, knowing I was alone in the house but still locked in. He never left me unsecured when he wasn't home. I think he was afraid I'd find a way out. The lock was solid. I'd tried everything. The door opened inward, so I couldn't remove the hinges. The window had security bars. Because we lived in a rough neighborhood, I was truly trapped. The longest locking before the fever was 4 days. I don't even remember what I'd done wrong. Something minor that triggered his anger. 4 days of sliding plates, of silence, of losing track of time because I couldn't tell day from night without seeing outside clearly. By day 3 of that one, I'd stopped crying, stopped calling out, just existed in a numb state, waiting. My room smelled stale, I smelled stale, but there was nothing I could do. Then came the locking that changed everything. I'd spilled milk at breakfast on a Tuesday, knocked over the glass, reaching for the cereal box. My father's face closed down immediately. That look I'd learned to dread. Room. I went without argument. Heard the lock click. Settled in for what I assumed would be another long stretch. But on the second day, Wednesday afternoon, I started feeling wrong. Not just sad or anxious like usual, but physically wrong. My head hurt. My skin felt hot. I couldn't get comfortable. By Wednesday night, I was shivering under my blankets. Despite the heat radiating from my skin, I called out to my father, told him I was sick, needed help. I heard him pause outside my door, heard him standing there, then heard him walk away. Thursday morning, I barely touched the breakfast he slid under the door. My throat hurt too much to swallow. Everything ached. I was sweating through my sheets. I called for him again, louder this time, begging, telling him I had a fever, that something was really wrong. Silence, just his footsteps walking away. And in that moment, I understood something. Terrible. He knew I was sick. He could hear me. He just didn't care. The punishment was more important than my health. I spent Thursday in a haze of fever dreams, drifting in and out of consciousness. My water bottle was empty, and I couldn't reach the bathroom sink from where I'd collapsed on the floor, too weak to stand. Friday morning, I woke up barely, my vision blurry, my body so hot I felt like I was burning from the inside. I tried to call out again, but my voice was just a whisper. The plate of food appeared under the door like always. I stared at it from the floor, unable to move, unable to reach it. I don't know how much time passed. Hours, maybe. Then I heard a different sound. My brother's voice, panicked, calling for my father. Something's wrong. I looked under the door and I can see him on the floor. He's not moving right. My father's voice, annoyed. He's fine. He's just being dramatic. Dad, please. He looks really sick. More arguing. Then finally, the lock clicking. The door opened, and I saw my father's face change when he saw me on the floor. Saw the real fear flicker across his expression. Not fear for me, but fear of consequences. Fear of what might happen if I was actually dying. He took me to urgent care, told them I'd developed sudden flu symptoms. They took my temperature, 104 degrees. I was severely dehydrated. They wanted to know why I'd been left in this condition for so long. My father said I'd just gotten sick that morning, that he'd brought me in as soon as he noticed. I was too weak to contradict him, too weak to explain that I'd been locked in my room for 3 days while my fever climbed. They kept me overnight for EV fluids. My father stayed, playing the concerned parent role for the nurses. I watched him perform and felt nothing, just emptiness. When we got home the next day, the lock was still on my door. He never mentioned removing it, never apologized, never acknowledged what he'd done. The lockings continued after that, though never quite as long. I think he was scared I might actually die next time, and then he'd have to explain it, so he kept them to a day or two maximum. But the damage was done. I knew now, without any doubt, that my father would rather let me suffer, let me hurt, maybe even let me die, than give up his control, then admit his punishment had gone too far. I was 12 years old, recovering from a fever in my bedroom. That was sometimes my room, and sometimes my prison, depending on my father's mood, depending on whether I'd made a mistake, depending on nothing I could predict or prevent. And every time I looked at that lock on the outside of my door, I saw the 3 days I'd spent burning with fever while my father walked past, heard my calls for help, and chose his power over my survival. That was the lesson he really taught me. Not about consequences or behavior, but about how little I mattered to him, how completely I was at his mercy, how the lock on my door was really a lock on my entire existence, and there was nothing I could do but wait and hope that someday I'd be big enough, old enough, strong enough to walk out that door and never let anyone lock me in again. I was 22 when I found the folder, visiting my mother's house to pick up some childhood belongings before moving across the country. She was at work and had told me I could look through the attic for anything I wanted to keep. The folder was in a filing cabinet labeled Important Documents, tucked between tax returns and insurance papers. A 3-inch binder packed with notebook paper, all of it covered in my handwriting from different ages, different stages of my life. I pulled out the first letter and recognized it immediately. The careful printing of a 7-year-old trying to stay inside the lines. "Dear Mom, I am very sorry for lying about brushing my teeth," it started. "I know that lying is wrong and hurts people who love me." Then I saw my mother's notes in red pen along the margins. "Lacks genuine contrition. Too focused on the act, not the betrayal of trust. Rewrite with more emotional depth." I flipped through more pages, hundreds of them. Letters spanning from age 6 to 17, every single one annotated in my mother's handwriting, graded like school assignments, marked up with corrections and criticisms, the apology letters. I'd almost forgotten about them, or maybe I'd tried to forget, but holding this archive of forced remorse brought everything back with sharp clarity. It started when I was 6. I'd broken a plate while setting the table. An accident. My small hands just couldn't hold it properly. But my mother didn't accept accidents as excuses. She sat me at the kitchen table with a pencil and paper and told me to write an apology letter. I didn't really understand what she wanted. I was 6 and barely knew how to write paragraphs, but I tried. "I'm sorry I broke the plate," I wrote. "I will be more careful." She read it, frowned, handed it back. "That's not an apology. That's a sentence. I want you to think about what you did wrong and write it properly." I tried again, longer this time, explaining how I'd dropped the plate, how I knew plates cost money, how I would try not to break things. She read this version and her frown deepened. "You're still not understanding. You need to apologize for being careless, for not respecting our belongings, for making me disappointed. You need to show me you feel bad about this, not just describe what happened." It took 4 drafts before she accepted that first apology letter. By the end, I was crying, exhausted, my hand cramping from gripping the pencil. But I'd finally produced something that satisfied her, that became the pattern for everything. Forgot to make my bed, apology letter. Talked back, apology letter. Got a bad grade, apology letter. Came home 10 minutes late from a friend's house, apology letter. The requirements got more complex as I got older. By age 10, she expected at least 2 pages. By 12, it was 3 pages minimum, single-spaced. She wanted specific language, specific emotions expressed in specific ways. I had to explain what I'd done wrong, why it was wrong, how it had affected her and the family, what character flaws in myself had led to the mistake, what steps I would take to prevent it from happening again, and most importantly, how deeply sorry I was. But sorry was never enough. She'd read each letter with a critical eye, marking phrases that sounded insincere or defensive, circling words that didn't convey enough remorse, writing notes about how I needed to dig deeper into my emotional failings. A letter about staying up past bedtime came back with, "You haven't addressed why you think rules don't apply to you. Revise," written across the top. A letter about forgetting to feed the dog was returned with margin notes saying, "This reads like you're making excuses. Take full responsibility for your negligence, no hedging." I learned to write what she wanted to read, learned the language of self-flagellation that would pass her standards, learned to craft expressions of guilt and shame that felt authentic enough to satisfy her. "I am deeply ashamed of my behavior," I'd write. "My actions show a fundamental lack of respect, and I understand how much I've hurt you. I recognize that this reflects serious character flaws I need to address." At age 13, critiquing my own personality in ways I didn't even understand. "I know I've disappointed you again, and I hate myself for it." At 15, casual self-hatred written as currency for forgiveness. The worst part was the multiple drafts. Some letters took 5 or 6 attempts before she'd accept them. Each rejection coming with more notes, more criticisms, more demands for deeper self-examination. I'd spend entire evenings rewriting the same apology, trying to find the exact combination of words that would satisfy her. My homework forgotten, my friends' texts unanswered, just me and my notebook and my mother's increasingly frustrated annotations. Still too defensive. Try again. "I don't believe you're truly sorry. Your word choice suggests resentment. This is lazy. You can do better. Think harder about what you've done." My younger brother got the same treatment. I'd see him at the kitchen table with his own notebook, crying over his own apology letters. But we never talked about it. Never compared notes. It felt too shameful somehow, like admitting out loud that this was our normal would make it more real. By the time I was 16, I could produce an acceptable apology letter in 1 draft. I'd mastered the formula, knew exactly what level of self-criticism she required, exactly what emotional beats needed to be hit. I wrote them mechanically, efficiently, feeling nothing while I described my deep remorse and overwhelming guilt. They were performances, scripts, necessary paperwork to process my failures. But sitting in her attic at 22, reading through this archive of forced apologies, I started to shake. There were letters, here I didn't remember writing, from incidents I'd completely blocked out. A letter from age 8, apologizing for crying too much after my grandfather died. My mother's note saying, "Grief is understandable, but manipulation through tears is not. Explain the difference." A letter from age 11, apologizing for asking if we could get pizza for dinner instead of cooking. Shows entitlement and lack of appreciation for mother's efforts. She'd written in red pen. A letter from age 14, apologizing for my first B grade in English. 3 pages of self-criticism about my work ethic and dedication. Her notes critiquing my lack of true commitment to improvement. I found the letter I'd written at 17 when I'd applied to colleges without telling her first. She'd been furious that I'd made decisions about my future without her input. The apology letter was 7 pages long. I'd written it over 2 days, 5 complete drafts. Reading it now, I could barely recognize myself in the words. The level of self-blame was extreme, calling myself selfish and disrespectful and ungrateful, describing my desire for independence as a character flaw that needed correcting. Her final notes on that one said, "Acceptable, though I still sense underlying defiance, remain vigilant." I sat on the attic floor, surrounded by years of these letters, seeing them all together for the first time, understanding the scope of what she'd done. She'd made me document my own psychological breaking, made me write the script of my own diminishment, turned every mistake into an opportunity to practice self-hatred, normalized the idea that I needed to grovel and debase myself for the smallest infractions. And she'd kept them all, filed them away like trophies, evidence of her control, proof that she could make me say anything, believe anything about myself, as long as she rejected enough drafts and demanded enough emotional vulnerability. I thought about taking the folder with me, evidence of what my childhood had really been like, but my hands wouldn't cooperate. I couldn't touch it anymore. Instead, I put it back exactly where I'd found it, between the tax returns and insurance papers, left the attic, left the house, got in my car, and drove away. But the damage was done, not by finding the letters, but by having written them in the first place, by spending my entire childhood and adolescence apologizing for existing in ways that displeased her, by learning to criticize myself in her voice, by internalizing the idea that I was always wrong and she was always justified in demanding my submission. I was 22 years old, supposedly an adult, but I still caught myself mentally drafting apology letters when I made mistakes. Still heard her voice critiquing my remorse as insufficient. Still felt that old panic when someone said I'd done something wrong, wondering how many drafts it would take before they'd forgive me. She'd trained me so well that I didn't need her physically present anymore to continue the pattern. I'd do it to myself automatically, apologizing, excessively, over-explaining my mistakes, degrading myself preemptively before anyone else could. And the worst realization, the one that made me pull over on the highway because my hands were shaking too hard to drive safely, was that I didn't know how to stop. I didn't know who I was without the apology letters, without the constant self-examination and criticism, without the framework of wrongness that had defined my entire relationship with my mother. She'd made me write hundreds of letters confessing my failures, and in doing so had convinced me that failure was my natural state, that I was always one mistake away from needing to prove my worth again through perfect expressions of remorse. I was 22 years old, about to move across the country, trying to build a life independent from her. But I was taking those letters with me anyway. Not the physical ones in her attic, but the ones written in my mind. The permanent record of insufficiency she'd taught me to maintain. And I didn't know how to stop writing them. Didn't know how to forgive myself without her approval. Didn't know how to exist without constantly documenting my own failures in carefully crafted prose designed to satisfy someone else's impossible standards. The folder stayed in her attic, but the damage lived in me, and no amount of distance was going to change that. not without years of unlearning, of recognizing that normal mistakes don't require dissertations of self-criticism, that accidents are just accidents, that I didn't need to apologize for being imperfectly human. But I wasn't there yet. I was still in my car on the side of the highway, still shaking, still mentally drafting an apology letter for finding the folder, for being upset about it, for letting it affect me. Still my mother's daughter, still writing apologies she'd never read, but would absolutely critique if she did. My father offered me a job at his accounting firm the summer before my senior year, said it would be good experience, look great on college applications, help me save money for school. He'd pay me $15 an hour to do filing and data entry, 20 hours a week. I calculated it would be $1,200 a month. I was excited, finally having my own money, being able to save for college, maybe buy a car. My father made it sound like he was doing me this huge favor, giving me opportunities other kids didn't get. The first 2 weeks went fine. I showed up on time, did the work, learned the systems. On the third Friday, he handed me an envelope with my paycheck inside, $600 for the 40 hours I'd worked. I thanked him, put it in my bag, but when I got home and opened it, the check was made out for $400, not $600. I thought it was a mistake at first. Brought it up to him that evening. He looked at the check and nodded like everything was normal. Right. I deducted $200 for training costs and use of office equipment. Training costs. I'd been filing papers and entering numbers into spreadsheets. He hadn't trained me in anything special. And office equipment. I was using his computer and his files, things he already owned. That's standard, he said when I questioned it. Part of learning workplace economics. You'll get it back eventually as a bonus if you do well. I didn't argue. I was 17 and he was my father, and he owned a successful business. Surely he knew how these things worked. The next paycheck was $350 after deductions for administrative overhead. The one after that was $275 because he'd borrowed $125 for household expenses that I owed him for. You live here rent-free, he explained. Eat our food, use our utilities. It's only fair you contribute something. Consider it a learning experience about real financial responsibility. By the end of the summer, I'd worked 320 hours, but had received maybe $2,000 total instead of the $4,800 I'd earned. The rest had been deducted, borrowed, held. For various reasons, my father explained with confident authority. I wanted to quit, but school was starting and he'd already written a recommendation letter for my college applications about my excellent work ethic and professional experience at his firm. He showed it to me, told me how impressive it would look. Unless you quit, he added casually. Then I'd have to update the letter to reflect that you couldn't handle professional responsibilities. That wouldn't look good to admissions committees. So I stayed. Working weekends during the school year, he cut my hours to 10 a week, but the deductions continued. Now he was taking money for investment opportunities. He was managing for me. I'm putting this aside in accounts that will grow, he said. You'll thank me when you see the returns. I asked to see the account statements. He got irritated, said I didn't trust him, said I was being ungrateful after everything he'd done for me. I was 18 now, filling out college applications, looking at scholarships, trying to figure out how I'd pay for school since the money I'd supposedly saved was invisible. Every time I asked about it, my father had explanations about market timing and strategic investments. Then in December, I applied for a student credit card, just a small one to start building credit. Like my guidance counselor had suggested, I was denied immediately. The rejection letter said I already had too much outstanding debt. I called the credit card company confused. I'd never had a credit card before, never had any debt. The representative put me on hold, came back and told me I had 3 credit cards with a combined balance of $12,000. My stomach dropped. That's impossible. I've never opened a credit card. According to our records, you have cards from 3 different companies, all opened within the last 18 months. all currently carrying balances. Would you like me to send you the account numbers? I said. Yes, my hands shaking, wrote down the numbers she gave me, then called each company. All 3 cards had been opened when I was 16 and 17. Someone had used my social security number and birth date. The addresses on file were post office boxes I'd never heard of. But the names were mine. The applications had been submitted online. I knew immediately who'd done it. There was only one person who had access to all my personal information, who could forge my signature, who understood credit systems well enough to exploit them. That night, I confronted my father, showed him the account numbers, asked him directly if he'd opened credit cards in my name. He didn't even try to deny it, just looked annoyed that I'd found out. I needed some short-term capital for business expenses. This was the easiest solution. I'm paying them off. You don't need to worry about it. You committed fraud, I said, my voice shaking. You destroyed my credit before I even turned 18. Don't be dramatic. He waved his hand dismissively. Credit scores can be rebuilt. This is a temporary situation. I'm handling it. You're handling it by not paying the bills. All 3 cards are maxed out and behind on payments. His expression hardened then, the casual dismissiveness replaced by something colder. You need to be very careful about how you proceed with this. If you make accusations or try to report this, it will affect your college applications. I can make sure every school you've applied to knows you're difficult, litigious, willing to destroy your own family over minor financial disagreements. I stared at him, understanding fully for the first time that this had never been about giving me job experience or teaching me responsibility. It had been about control and exploitation from the beginning. Plus, he continued, you've been working for me for 1.5 years. I have documentation of all the money I've paid you. If you push this, I can claim you knew about the credit cards, that you authorized them, that you're trying to back out now to avoid responsibility. That's not true. Doesn't matter what's true, matters what I can prove, and I'm very good with documentation. I was trapped, completely trapped. If I reported the fraud, he'd sabotage my college applications. If I didn't report it, my credit was ruined. I couldn't get loans, couldn't rent an apartment eventually, couldn't build any kind of financial independence. The next few months were nightmare. I kept working at his firm because I was terrified of what he'd do if I quit. Kept watching the credit card balances grow as he charged more and missed more payments. Kept applying to colleges knowing my father held all the power over whether I'd actually get to attend. I got accepted to 3 schools in April, all of them requiring student loans I couldn't qualify for because of my credit score. My father offered to co-sign the loans, said he'd help me, but I knew what that meant. It meant more debt, more control, more years of him holding my financial future hostage. I tried to find scholarships that didn't require credit checks, applied to dozens, spent every spare moment writing essays and filling out applications. My father noticed. You're wasting your time. You need my help with this. Stop being stubborn and let me co-sign the loans. I want to do this myself. He laughed, actually laughed. With what money? With what credit? I made sure you can't do this yourself. That was the whole point. The whole point, he said it so casually, admitting that destroying my financial independence had been intentional, strategic, a plan he'd executed perfectly while I'd trusted him. I was 18 years old, legally an adult but economically powerless. My father had systematically ensured that every path to independence required going through him, required his approval, his co-signature, his permission. In June, 2 weeks before graduation, I came home from school and found my father at the kitchen table with a stack of loan papers. I went ahead and applied for your student loans, he said. They're approved. All you have to do is sign. You're going to State University in the fall. Congratulations. State University was his choice, not mine. It was local, meaning I'd live at home, meaning I'd continue working at his firm, meaning nothing would change. I got a scholarship to the college in Colorado, I said quietly. Full tuition, I'm going there." His face went blank. "No, you're not. You can't afford housing or living expenses. You have no money." "I'll work. I'll figure it out. With your credit score, you can't even rent a room. Landlords will reject you immediately. You can't get a car loan. Can't get utilities in your name. You're stuck, and the sooner you accept that, the better." He was right, and he knew it. He'd built this trap so carefully, so completely, that there was no easy escape. Every door to independence was locked, and he held all the keys. I graduated high school 3 days later, walked across the stage while my father took pictures, and smiled like a proud parent. The whole time I was calculating, planning, trying to find a way out of the financial prison he'd constructed around me. That summer, I worked full-time at his firm. He still deducted mysterious amounts from my paychecks, still made promises about investments and bonuses I'd never see. The credit card debt kept growing, now over $15,000. I was 18 years old, trapped by debt I didn't create, controlled by financial sabotage disguised as parental help. And the worst part was knowing he'd done it all deliberately, methodically, knowing exactly what he was taking from me. Not just my money or my credit score, but my ability to leave, my chance at independence, my future where I made my own choices. He'd turned my own identity into a weapon against me, used my social security number to build chains I couldn't break, and called it love, called it teaching me responsibility, called it doing what was best for me. And I still had to sit across from him at dinner and pretend we were a normal family. Still had to thank him for the opportunities he'd given me. Still had to smile while he explained why I couldn't leave, why I needed him, why I'd always need him, because he'd made sure of it, one fraudulent credit card at a time. The first time it happened, I came home from school on a Tuesday and found moving boxes stacked in the living room. My mother was wrapping dishes in newspaper, moving with frantic energy, barely acknowledging me when I walked in. "We're moving," she said without looking up. "Start packing your room, everything. We leave tomorrow morning." I stood there, confused. We'd lived in this house my entire life. I'd never heard any discussion about moving. Where are we going? Does it matter? Pack your things, now. The thing that scared me most wasn't the moving itself. It was the sudden totality of it. Yesterday, everything was normal. Today, our entire life was being dismantled with urgency that felt like panic, like we were fleeing something. My younger sister was already in her room stuffing clothes into garbage bags, crying, asking questions that got no answers. My mother moved through the house like a storm, emptying closets, clearing shelves, wrapping everything in newspaper and tape. I packed my room in a daze, not understanding what was happening. My mother wouldn't explain, wouldn't tell us where we were going or why. Just kept saying, "Hurry up," and "We don't have time for questions." By midnight, the house was packed, boxes everywhere, furniture wrapped, our entire existence compressed into cardboard and tape. I couldn't sleep that night, kept thinking about leaving my school, my friends, everything familiar. The next morning, my mother was still packing, said the movers were coming at noon. I asked again where we were going. "You'll find out when we get there." But the movers never came. Noon passed. Then afternoon, my mother sat on the couch surrounded by boxes, staring at nothing. At dinner time, she stood up and said, "Unpack everything. We're not moving after all. Put it all back exactly where it was." My sister and I looked at each other, exhausted, confused. Why did we pack if we're not moving? My mother's expression went cold. "It was a test. I needed to see if you would follow instructions without questioning everything. Needed to see if you trusted me. Clearly you failed since all you did was complain and ask questions." We spent the next 2 days unpacking, putting everything back. My muscles ached. My mind couldn't process what had happened. It felt like a nightmare that kept changing rules. 3 weeks later, it happened again. I came home and found boxes in the hallway, my mother packing the kitchen. "We're moving this weekend. I mean it this time. Start packing." The whiplash was disorienting. I didn't know if she was serious, if this was another test, If I should pack or refuse or what the right response was, I packed anyway. What else could I do? My sister cried through the whole process. She was only 10 and couldn't understand why our mother kept doing this. This time we got as far as loading boxes into a rental truck. My mother had actually rented a truck. I thought maybe this was real, but then she sent the truck away empty and told us to unpack. Another test, she said. You both failed again. You didn't pack efficiently. You complained too much. You showed me you're not ready for change. The pattern established itself over the next 2 years. Every few weeks or months, my mother would suddenly announce we were moving. We'd pack everything, sometimes quickly, sometimes over several days. Then she'd call it off, call it a test, criticize how we'd handled it. Sometimes we'd pack just our clothes, sometimes the entire house. Sometimes she'd give us 2 hours, sometimes 2 days. There was no way to predict what version we'd get. Each time she had different criteria, we'd supposedly failed. We didn't pack fast enough, or we packed too fast and were careless. We asked too many questions, or we didn't ask enough questions. We showed too much emotion, or not enough emotion. My sister developed anxiety so severe she'd start hyperventilating whenever she saw a cardboard box. I started having nightmares about packing, about endless cycles of filling boxes and emptying them. School became impossible to focus on. I never knew if I'd come home to a normal house or a packing frenzy. Never knew if this would be the time we actually left. Teachers noticed my grades slipping, but I couldn't explain what was happening at home. Then one day in October, I was 13, I came home from school, and the house was completely empty. All the furniture gone, all the boxes gone, just empty rooms, and our footsteps echoing on bare floors. On the kitchen counter was a note in my mother's handwriting. We left without you. Figure out why. I stood there holding the note, my backpack still on my shoulders, trying to understand, trying to breathe through the panic rising in my chest. They'd actually left. My mother and sister had moved somewhere without me. I'd failed some test I didn't know I was taking, and now I was alone in an empty house. I called my mother's phone. It went straight to voicemail. I called my sister's phone. Same thing, I sat on the floor of the empty living room and tried to think logically. Where would they go? How would I find them? What had I done wrong? Hours passed. It got dark. I turned on lights that still worked, sat in the empty house waiting for something to make sense. Around 8 p.m., I heard a truck pull up outside. Heard voices. The front door opened, and my mother walked in, followed by moving men carrying our furniture back inside. She saw me sitting on the floor and smiled. There you are. Good. You waited. That's what you were supposed to do. You left me. My voice came out broken, shaky. Of course I didn't leave you. It was a test. I needed to know if you'd panic or stay calm, if you'd abandon the house or protect it. You did well this time. The moving men brought everything back in, placed furniture where it had been that morning. My mother directed them cheerfully like this was completely normal. My sister got out of the truck looking exhausted. She'd been with my mother all day, driving around, waiting in parking lots, while my mother timed how long it would take me to figure things out. How could you do that? I asked when the movers left. How could you let me think you'd abandon me? My mother's face shifted, the cheerfulness vanishing. Don't be dramatic. It was a few hours. You're fine. This is how you learn resilience, how you learn not to depend on anyone, even family, especially family. The moving test continued, but now they had a new element of cruelty. Sometimes my mother would pack just my things, leave my sister's room untouched, tell me I was being sent away for failing. Sometimes she'd pack everything except my things, tell me I'd been left behind permanently, that they were starting over without me. I was 14 when I started keeping a bag packed, hidden in my closet, clothes and documents, and money I'd saved from birthday gifts, just in case one of these times she actually did leave, and I needed to survive. My sister did the same. We didn't talk about it, but I saw her bag once, hidden under her bed. We'd both learned not to trust that our mother would keep us, learned to prepare for abandonment. The worst test came in June. My mother woke us at 3 a.m., said we were leaving right now, emergency move. No time to pack anything except one bag each. We'd buy everything new. We got in the car with our hidden bags, the ones we'd prepared for this exact scenario, drove for 6 hours while my mother talked about our new life, how everything would be different, better. Then she turned the car around, drove us home, said, "See, you are ready to leave everything behind, ready to abandon your life here. That shows you don't value what you have. Test failed." The logic made no sense, but nothing about the tests ever made sense. They weren't really about passing or failing. They were about keeping us unstable, keeping us constantly uncertain about whether we had a home, whether we were wanted, whether tomorrow we'd wake up in the same place or somewhere completely different. I was 15 when I realized my mother wasn't testing us. She was torturing us, using the idea of moving as a weapon to create constant psychological instability. Every box became a threat. Every mention of change sent me into panic. I couldn't plan for the future because I didn't know if I'd be in the same house next week. My friends stopped inviting me to things because I could never commit, never knew if I'd still be there. My grades suffered because I couldn't focus on homework when I might come home to packed boxes. The moving tests finally stopped when I was 16, not because my mother decided to stop, but because I'd learned to show absolutely no reaction, no emotion. No matter what she did, she'd announce we were moving, and I'd nod and start packing mechanically. She'd say it was a test, and I'd nod and unpack mechanically. She'd leave notes saying they'd abandoned me, and I'd sit calmly and wait. I think she got bored when she couldn't get a reaction anymore, when the test stopped producing the fear and confusion and panic she was looking for. But the damage was permanent. I was 20 now, living on my own, and I still couldn't settle anywhere, still kept a bag packed, still felt anxious whenever I saw moving boxes, still had nightmares about coming home to empty houses, about notes saying I'd been left behind, about packing and unpacking the same items over and over in an endless cycle. My mother called it building resilience, teaching us not to be attached to material things, preparing us for life's uncertainties. But what she really taught us was that home was never safe, that family could disappear without warning, that everything we built could be dismantled in a day for reasons we'd never understand. She taught us to live in constant anticipation of loss, and she called it love. I started taking anxiety medication when I was 19, prescribed by my doctor after months of panic attacks that made it impossible to function. The initial dose was low, 5 milligallers once daily, meant to be increased gradually if needed under medical supervision. My father offered to pick up my prescriptions from the pharmacy, said it would be easier since he drove past there on his way home from work anyway. I was grateful. One less thing to worry about while juggling college classes and a part-time job. The medication helped at first. The panic attacks became less frequent, less intense. I could breathe normally again, could sit through lectures without my heart racing. My doctor was pleased with my progress at the 1-month follow-up. But around week 6, things started changing. I felt dizzy more often, had trouble concentrating in class. My hands would shake when I tried to write notes. I'd get nauseous for no reason. Sleep became difficult, even though I was exhausted all the time. I thought maybe these were just adjustment symptoms, things my body needed to work through. My father assured me this was normal when I mentioned it, said he'd experienced similar side effects when he'd taken anxiety medication years ago, said I just needed to push through it. The symptoms got worse. By week 8, I was sleeping 12 hours a night, but waking up feeling drugged. My coordination was off. I'd stumble going upstairs, drop things constantly. My thoughts felt thick and slow like moving through fog. I called my doctor's office, explained the side effects. The nurse sounded concerned, said these weren't typical reactions to my dosage, scheduled me for an appointment the following week. My father seemed annoyed when I told him about the appointment. Doctors always overreact, he said. You're fine. Your body's just adjusting. If you stop now, You'll have to start over." But I went to the appointment anyway. My doctor asked detailed questions about my symptoms, reviewed my medication log, frowned at her computer screen. "These side effects are consistent with a much higher dose than what I prescribed," she said. "Are you taking more than 1 pill per day?" "No, just one 5 mg pill every morning like you told me." She looked confused. "Can you bring in your medication bottle? I want to see exactly what you're taking." I brought it to my next appointment 3 days later, handed her the orange prescription bottle with my name on the label. She opened it, examined the pills, her frown deepened. "These are 25 mg tablets," she said slowly. "I prescribed 5 mg. This is 5 times the dose you should be taking. No wonder you're having these symptoms." My stomach dropped. "The label says 5 mg. That's what's written on the bottle." She showed me. The label did say 5 mg, but the pills inside were clearly marked with 25 on them. Someone had filled the bottle with the wrong medication. "This is a serious pharmacy error," my doctor said. "You need to contact them. Immediately, these kinds of mistakes can be dangerous." I left her office feeling shaky, not from the medication, but from fear. I'd been taking 5 times my prescribed dose for 2 months. That explained everything. The dizziness, the confusion, the tremors, all of it. I went to the pharmacy that afternoon, asked to speak to the pharmacist, explained the situation. She pulled up my records on her computer. Her expression shifted from concern to confusion. "According to our system, you're prescribed 25 mg," she said. "We've been filling it at that strength since your second refill." My doctor only prescribed 5 mg. The pharmacist checked something else. "There have been multiple calls from your father requesting dosage adjustments. We have notes here that he said your doctor wanted to increase the strength." The floor felt unsteady beneath me. My father called in dosage changes. "Yes, 3 times over the past 2 months, each time increasing the strength. He said he was calling on behalf of your doctor. We should have verified directly with the prescriber. I apologize. This is a serious protocol violation on our part." She printed out the records for me, showed me the dates my father had called, the exact dosage increases he'd requested, 5 mg to 10 mg, then 10 mg to 15 mg, then 15 mg to 25 mg, each change unauthorized, each one making me sicker. I drove home with the printouts shaking in my hands. My father was in the living room watching television when I walked in. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He looked up, casual, unconcerned. "About what?" I put the pharmacy records on the coffee table in front of him. "About why you've been changing my medication dosage without my doctor's knowledge. About why you've been making me take 5 times what I'm supposed to." His face didn't change. No surprise, no guilt, just mild annoyance. "Your doctor wasn't aggressive enough with your treatment. I could see you were still anxious, still struggling. I was helping." "Helping? I've been sick for 2 months. Dizzy, confused. I couldn't function. That was helping. Those are just side effects. They would have passed eventually. You needed a stronger dose to really address your anxiety. You're not a doctor. You can't just decide to change my medication. You could have seriously hurt me." He stood up, his casualness replaced by irritation. "I'm your father. I know what's best for you better than some doctor who sees you for 15 minutes every few months. You were falling apart, having panic attacks. I fixed it. By poisoning me, by lying to the pharmacy, by making me take medication that made everything worse. It made things better. Your panic attacks stopped, didn't they?" They had stopped, but I suddenly understood why. I'd been so drugged, so foggy and slow that I couldn't feel anything strongly enough to panic. I'd been chemically flattened into numbness. "I'm going back to my prescribed dose," I said. "The correct dose, 5 mg, and you're never picking up my prescriptions again." His jaw tightened. "You live in my house, under my roof. If you want to continue doing that, you'll take the medication I give you. The way I give it to you, I've been managing your health successfully. You're not going to undermine that because some pharmacist made you paranoid." "The pharmacist didn't make me paranoid. You committed fraud. You impersonated a doctor's office. You've been drugging me. I've been taking care of you." His voice got louder. "You were a mess, crying all the time, couldn't handle basic responsibilities. I stepped in and fixed the problem. And this is the thanks I get: accusations and drama." I grabbed the pharmacy records and went to my room, locked the door. My hands were shaking again, but not from medication this time. From the realization of what my father had done, what he'd been doing. I called my doctor's office, explained everything to the nurse. She said they'd noted in my file that they'd only accept prescription changes directly from my doctor going forward, that I should consider filing a report. That night, I flushed the 25 milliliters pills down the toilet. The next morning, I went to a different pharmacy across town, filled my prescription properly, told them explicitly that only my doctor could authorize changes. The withdrawal from the higher dose was brutal. Even with my doctor's guidance, my anxiety came roaring back worse than before, compounded by the physical symptoms of going from 25 milliliters to 5 milliliters, sweating, trembling, insomnia, nausea. My father watched me go through it with this satisfied expression, like I was proving his point, showing that I couldn't handle the lower dose, that I needed his intervention. "You see," he'd say when I looked particularly sick, "you needed the higher dose. Your body's telling you that. Just let me call the pharmacy. We can fix this." But I didn't let him fix anything. I suffered through the withdrawal, through the adjustment period. Slowly, my head cleared. The fog lifted. I could think straight again. And thinking straight meant understanding fully what he'd done. My father had systematically increased my medication to dangerous levels, watched me suffer the side effects, dismissed my concerns, lied to medical professionals, all while claiming he was helping. He hadn't been trying to cure my anxiety. He'd been trying to control it, control me, keep me dependent and foggy and unable to function independently. I was 20 years old, legally an adult, but living at home while attending college, financially dependent on my father, which meant leaving wasn't simple. But I started planning anyway, looking for roommates, calculating if I could afford rent and tuition, researching student loans, because staying in a house with someone who'd poison me for control wasn't survivable long term. My father noticed me pulling away, asked what was wrong with increasing hostility. I said nothing, kept my plans quiet, kept my real medications hidden in my car where he couldn't access them. 3 months later, I moved out, found a room in a house with 2 other students, told my father I needed more independence. Didn't mention that I was afraid of what he might do next. He acted hurt, betrayed, said I was overreacting to a simple misunderstanding, that he'd only been trying to help, that I was ungrateful and dramatic. But I'd seen the pharmacy records, seen the systematic increases, seen his complete lack of remorse when confronted. I knew it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was calculated, deliberate harm disguised as paternal care. I was 21 now, living on my own, managing my anxiety with the correct medication and therapy. My head was clear, my hands steady. I could function normally again, but I couldn't forget what my father had done. Couldn't forget the 2 months of being drugged into confusion. Couldn't forget how easily he'd manipulated medical systems to hurt me while claiming love. Sometimes I wondered if he'd done it before. To my mother, when they were married. To other people, if this was a pattern or if I'd been specifically targeted. Mostly, I wondered how someone could watch their child struggle with side effects from medication they'd secretly increased and feel nothing but satisfaction at the control they'd established. My father still called sometimes, asked how I was feeling, if I needed help with anything, his voice warm and concerned, the perfect caring parent. I kept the conversation short, kept my medical information private, kept my distance, because I'd learned that some people will poison you slowly while holding your hand, will call it helping while they watch you suffer, will weaponize care itself until you can't tell the difference between love and harm. And my father had taught me that lesson perfectly, 5 milligrams at a time. I was 24 when I started seriously questioning whether my childhood had actually happened the way I remembered it, or if I'd imagined everything, fabricated memories, constructed a false history that existed only in my unreliable mind. My mother had always corrected my memories, gently at first, then with increasing firmness as I got older. "No, sweetie, that's not how it happened," she'd say with patient concern, like I was confused, like I needed her help to remember correctly. When I was 8, I remembered falling off my bike and breaking my arm. Remembered the hospital, the blue cast, my friend signing it. But my mother insisted I'd never broken my arm. Said I was thinking of my cousin who'd broken his wrist. "You're mixing up your memories with other people's experiences," she explained. "That happens sometimes, especially with children." But I remembered the pain, remembered crying in the emergency room, remembered wearing that cast for 6 weeks. The memory was vivid, detailed, specific. Yet my mother's certainty made me doubt what I knew I'd lived through. By the time I was 12, the corrections were constant. I'd mention something from my childhood, and she'd shake her head, offer a different version, tell me I was misremembering, misunderstanding, confusing things. The birthday party I remembered being canceled because I was sick, she said happened exactly as planned. I'd been there, happy, healthy. The family vacation where my parents fought constantly, she insisted was peaceful and fun, said I was inventing conflict. The time my father scared me by yelling so loud the neighbors called the police, she claimed never happened, said I'd seen it on television and internalized it as real. Each correction came with such confidence, such detail, such certainty that I started keeping a journal, writing down events as they happened, trying to create a record before my mother could revise it. But even that didn't help. I'd write something down, reference it weeks later, and she'd still insist her version was correct, would suggest I'd written my journal entries wrong, that I'd been confused even in the moment. The worst part was that other family members supported her versions, my aunt, my grandmother, even my younger brother. When I'd appeal to them for verification, they'd side with my mother, confirm her stories, contradict my memories. "You were really young," my aunt would say sympathetically. "Memory is tricky at that age." "Mom remembers it correctly," my brother would confirm. Even though he'd been 3 years old when some of these events supposedly happened, I felt like I was losing my mind, like reality was something other people decided, and I just had to accept their consensus even when it contradicted what I'd experienced. My mother's revisions got more ambitious as I got older. Entire years of my childhood were rewritten. She'd describe a happy, stable, loving family. I'd remember tension, fear, unpredictability. She'd talk about how close we'd all been, how much quality time we'd spent together. I remembered being left alone constantly, eating dinner by myself, my parents absent or fighting. "You were such a happy child," she'd tell people at family gatherings. "Never any problems, always smiling." While I stood there remembering crying myself to sleep, being scared in my own home, feeling invisible. When I was 18 and left for college, I thought distance might help, might give me space to trust my own memories without constant contradiction. But my mother called weekly, worked my revised childhood into every conversation. "Remember when we used to do this?" Describing activities we'd never done. "Remember how much you loved that?" Referencing things I'd hated, slowly building a false history that she expected me to accept. And I started to accept it, started doubting my own recollections. Maybe she was right. Maybe I did misremember. Maybe my childhood was better than I thought, and I'd invented problems that didn't exist. That doubt followed me into therapy at 22. I tried to talk about my childhood and hear myself hedging, qualifying. "I think this happened, but I'm not sure. I remember it this way, but my mother says differently," my therapist noticed. Asked why I doubted myself so much. I explained about my mother's corrections, about the family members who confirmed her versions, about feeling like my memories couldn't be trusted. "Have you ever verified your memories independently?" she asked. "Looked at photos, old records?" Anything outside your family's narrative. I hadn't. I just accepted that if multiple people remembered things differently than I did, I must be wrong. So I started looking, requested my medical records from childhood, found documentation of the broken arm my mother said never happened, found records of multiple emergency room visits I'd supposedly imagined. I contacted old teachers, asked about things I remembered from school. They confirmed events my mother had denied, validated memories she'd dismissed as fabricated. Then I found the home videos. My mother had filmed constantly when we were young, hours of footage on old tapes stored in her basement. I'd never watched them as an adult. When I visited for Christmas at 24, I asked if I could digitize them, preserve them. She seemed pleased, said it was a wonderful idea. I took the tapes home, spent weeks converting them, then started watching. The first tape destroyed a major narrative my mother had maintained for years. She'd always said my 5th birthday party was perfect, magical, that I'd been so happy, that it was one of her favorite memories. The video showed a very different reality. Me crying because my mother had invited people I didn't know, hadn't invited my actual friends. The camera captured her getting angry at me for crying, telling me I was ungrateful, ruining her hard work. I watched 5-year-old me trying to stop crying, trying to smile for the camera while clearly miserable, watch my mother staging happy moments, forcing me to pose and laugh. The contrast between her narrated version and the actual footage was stark. More tapes revealed more discrepancies. The family vacation she remembered as peaceful showed constant tension. My parents arguing in the background while the camera focused on forced smiles. The Christmas she described as our best ever showed me opening presents alone while my parents fought in another room. Every major event she'd revised was there on tape, documented, preserved, proof that my memories were accurate and her versions were fabrications. I compiled the most egregious examples, brought them to family dinner the next month. 25 years old and finally ready to prove I wasn't crazy, I showed the birthday party tape first, let everyone watch 5-year-old me crying, watched my mother's face as the footage played. When it ended, I waited for acknowledgement, for admission, for something. Instead, my mother smiled that patient smile I knew so well. "This is exactly what I've been talking about," she said calmly. "You're misinterpreting what you're seeing. Yes, you cried for a minute, but then you had a wonderful time. The video doesn't show the whole party, just that one difficult moment." "It's a 30-minute tape," I said. "It shows the entire party. I was upset the whole time." "You're focusing on the negative," she continued. "That's always been your problem. You remember the hard moments and forget all the good ones. This video proves my point. You were generally happy, but you're choosing to see only the tears." My aunt nodded. "She's right. We all remember that party being lovely overall." My brother agreed. "You're taking things out of context." I showed more tapes, pointed out specific contradictions. They watched the footage and somehow still sided with my mother's versions, explaining away what was clearly visible, reinterpreting obvious evidence. The vacation tape, where my parents fought constantly, that's just how we communicated. It wasn't fighting. You're reading aggression into normal discussion. The Christmas, where I was alone, you wanted private time with your presence. We were respecting your space. Every piece of evidence I presented got reframed, recontextualized, explained away. My mother sat there calmly revising reality while the proof played on the television screen. I left that dinner feeling more gaslit than ever, because now I had objective evidence, and it still didn't matter. The videos existed, but my family's collective narrative was stronger than documentation. My therapist helped me understand that this was the point. My mother hadn't been misremembering. She'd been systematically rewriting history, enlisting others to support her version, creating a consensus reality that overrode actual events. And when confronted with proof, she simply incorporated the proof into her narrative, claimed the evidence, supported her version, maintained her story, regardless of contradictions. I was 25 now, living across the country, minimal contact with my family. but the damage was permanent. I couldn't trust my own memories, even when I had video evidence. Couldn't shake the feeling that maybe I was misinterpreting everything. Maybe they were right and I was wrong. That's what gaslighting does. It doesn't just make you doubt specific memories. It makes you doubt your capacity to perceive reality accurately, makes you question whether your mind works correctly, whether you can trust yourself at all. My mother called sometimes, wanted to reminisce about my childhood. "Remember when?" she'd start, and I'd feel that old familiar pull to agree, to accept her version, to stop fighting the consensus. But I had the tapes now, digitized, backed up, proof that my memories were real, even if my family refused to acknowledge it. Some nights I'd watch them, see younger me experiencing things my mother claimed never happened, validate my own history through footage that somehow still wasn't enough to convince the people who'd been there. And I'd think about how reality is supposed to be objective, verifiable, but in my family it was negotiable, subject to revision, determined by whoever told the most convincing story. My mother had won that contest by sheer persistence, by correcting and revising and rewriting until her version became the official record, until everyone agreed that her memories were more reliable than mine, more real than video evidence. I was 25 years old, finally accepting that I'd never get validation from my family, never hear them admit that yes, my childhood happened the way I remembered it. Yes, my memories were accurate. Instead, I had to validate myself, had to trust that what I experienced was real, regardless of how many people denied it. The tapes helped, proof that I wasn't crazy, wasn't fabricating, wasn't misremembering. But they also showed me something sadder. My mother watching 5-year-old me cry on my birthday, and revising that memory into something magical, watching our family dysfunction on Christmas and remembering it as perfect. She'd been rewriting reality for so long, she might actually believe her versions now, might have convinced herself so thoroughly that the evidence of her own footage didn't register as contradiction. Or maybe she knew exactly what she was doing, knew the tapes showed her lies, and simply didn't care, because the narrative was more important than the truth, control was more important than accuracy, and maintaining her story was worth gaslighting her own daughter for 25 years. I'd never know which it was, never know if she was delusional or calculated. All I knew was that my childhood existed in 2 versions, the one I lived and the one she told. And in my family, her version was the only one that counted, even when the cameras proved otherwise. Thanks for listening to these chilling tales on Untold Whispers. If these stories kept you on edge, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more psychological horror every week. Share your own unsettling experiences in the comments below. We love hearing from you. Until next time, stay safe, trust your instincts, and remember, some whispers are better left unheard.